The history of support champions in League of Legends like Janna is of a very simple playstyle. Shielding allies, keeping everyone alive, and playing behind your team to stay alive due to your low HP. Janna specifically has a common misconception that she's quite a useless champion in lane that just sits on the tower behind the AD carry, occasionally shielding and not really putting up much lane pressure. However, in Season 10, one player decided he would be the one to change that misconception. This player is quite an unlikely candidate for this, and isn't someone you would expect to be a Janna player. Supports in most games are most likely to be the friendly player who looks after their teammates while healing and sometimes crowd control, as that's what the role needs. This Janna is the opposite of all of that. This player is actually quite a well-known figure in the League of Legends community, with roots in the L9 club related to Rat IRL. The player is Apocalypse, and I'll give a brief history of his past before we get back to his impressive Janna. Apocalypse, or sometimes shortened to Apo, is an incredibly toxic solo queue star who is best known for duoing with Rat IRL in early league seasons, then taking a break and returning as a high challenger Mordekaiser main. The L9 club were mostly just a few players who are really good at League of Legends, so they were involved with account boosting, but were also known to be some of the most toxic the game has ever seen, said to have popularised Disco Nunu. From there, he has messed around with multiple champions, and in Season 10 has settled into the support role and chosen Janna as his best pick to climb with. But what makes his Janna so good? Well, as you can imagine from his history, he's not exactly a classic passive shielding support player. Apo plays Janna like the lane bully she really is, choosing to provide as much lane pressure as possible in the early levels as she can by using W and Q to poke. He's used the strategy to climb all the way to rank 1 on EU West with 1,447 LP and a crazy 63% win rate on Janna in 408 games, most of which are actually taking place in Challenger. To even have a 63% win rate in Challenger is very impressive, but as a support, it's even more impressive. Apo usually starts W on Janna and looks to use it on the enemy laner who's closest to him, beginning his poke. At level 1, the W does a reasonable amount of damage to AD carries and can force them to miss CS. From there, he takes Q, level 2, and uses it from unexpected locations. His Janna Qs are a huge reason he is so good at the champion. If you watch some of these clips, he is not only predicting where enemies will be 3 seconds into the future when his ability reactivates, he is also outplaying them at the same time. Most of the time, Apo chooses to lay down a tornado and does not reactivate it himself, instead positioning in a way that forces enemies to walk towards where the tornado will go, and then lets it go itself. If enemies instead try to predict it, he's able to then walk up and land a W on them for extra damage. There are a ton of special ways he uses his Q, so here's a rundown of them. He has special spots in the lane where he uses the tornado from out of vision, which reduces the enemy's reaction time, and lets him set up kills for his AD carry. These are best from behind walls or inside bushes, especially on topside, from behind the wall, which has the widest reach. Janna Tornado has a huge range, so these spots all make sure to reach the opposite side of the lane to make sure they're cutting off enemies wherever they are. Another one of his favourites is in fights, where he positions his Q in the direction of choke points the enemies will need to run through if they want to engage or disengage. He is always trying to cover as many important spots as possible with every tornado, so he'll try and position the start of the tornado to peel for his team, and then the second half to cut off escapes or stop enemies from chasing. He's able to do this so well because of his incredible mechanics and movement. Apo abuses the crazy movement speed that Janna has to dodge constantly around enemies. He has baiting abilities and dives from assassins, which he then expertly disengages, so that his team can finish off the kills. The final and most important way he uses his tornadoes is what I'm going to call along the lanes. This is where he prepares a tornado from behind his team, ideally through Fog of War, with the direction pathing behind the enemy's objective. This is normally a straight line down the lane for maximum distance, and he uses it to ensure that enemies cannot hide behind any towers or walls to avoid his team. This is a great way for him to set up snowballs through dives, as well as secure more tower plates early game. If the enemy AD carry cannot walk up to grab CS without being hit by a tornado, then you're going to be making a lot of gold for free. This goes right back to his general playstyle. Since Apo is playing a support, his main influence on the game is how the early game goes. Once he gets to mid game, he mostly sticks to the classic Janna playstyle of keeping his carries safe, peeling as well as he possibly can, so his early game is where he has the highest chance to outplay opponents. Apo has the most success laning with a lane-dominant AD carry like Caitlyn or Draven, where he can constantly apply pressure in lane, even under tower, which lets them poke down the enemy tower plates, pick up kills, and then kill bot tower as fast as possible. From there, he he would move around the map, assisting his mid to pick up even more tower plates, and try to get as big of a gold lead as possible this way. Specifically, in high elo, it's so good to have an early gold lead, and this is how he wins most of his games. If he can create an 8,000 gold lead at 12 minutes, there's no way that the enemy team are going to come back. If he's not playing with a lane dominant AD carry, then he still wants to snowball, but he prefers a roaming style of Janna. Once again, Janna's movement speed is often overlooked, but Apo uses it amazingly. Even from level 3 in some lanes, he's looking to roam mid, preparing a tornado from Fog of War to cut off the enemy's retreat, then throwing a W slow on them. At this point, they either have to flash or are just dead. Apo does this as much as he possibly can, returning time and time again when his bot lane does not need any help. This is a perfect way to tilt the enemy mid laner, and pressure alone can give your mid a good CS advantage. Not only does he roam mid, but he also is constantly watching his jungler and moving into river to help whenever they are invading. Apo is always the first support to move, and thus is the most effective when joining an early fight. He is never afraid to steal kills, as he is able to use it to get more early AP, and use that to keep roaming around the map, dropping towers, basically playing as a secondary jungler. Sometimes he even roams straight from base to top lane, and you can imagine how much of a mental edge that creates for his team. If you are a top laner and you're getting ganked by an enemy support Janna, imagine how tilting that would be, and how you would assume that your bot lane is getting dominated. Apo creates uneven fights around the map while using his movement speed advantage, and this, as well as his lane dominance, is how he has climbed so high solo. We've talked a lot about his Janna, but let me be clear, Apo is incredibly toxic and is also rumoured to stream snipe as often as possible to win these games. He's absolutely skilled enough to win all of these games solo, without typing, without watching enemies' Twitch streams on another monitor, but he chooses to continue this absolutely disgusting mentality. Some of the other L9 members by this point have reduced their toxicity, including Selfmade, who is now even allowed to play in the LEC on Fnatic, and RatIRL, who has a huge Twitch following. However, Apo is still as toxic as ever, even getting permanently banned from streaming on Twitch. I've made this video to focus more on the fact that a Janna player can solo queue to a literal rank 1 on a server, and show you how you can replicate the playstyle yourself. If you just do some research into his background, you'll see some of the terrible things that he's done as a player, so try not to replicate those, maybe just watch some of his replays without the chat on, and instead try and keep that positive Janna mentality that supports normally have. I also read an interesting rumour about he climbed this fast in Challenger. I cannot find much evidence of it, but I have seen other players doing similar strategies. This is a specific way that players abuse the Riot MMR versus LP system. Apo has been said to have gotten into Master promos, won his first 2 games, and then dodged the other 3 in a row. He would then repeat this multiple times, so that his MMR is increasing behind the scenes, but his LP and rank are staying the same. The reason this is good is because once he finally chooses to get to Challenger, he will then be gaining high LP and not losing much LP, even playing versus high challengers. Once again, there's not much proof of him specifically doing this, but it has been a common strategy in the past, and it may just be that the Riot API on OPGG or some other stat sites struggle to show that this has happened. So what if you want to replicate it? For his skill order, he always starts W, then Q at level 2, and level 3 he takes W again for extra poke. Level 4 he gets his shield on his E, and from there he gets 3 points in his W before starting to max his E. So with 3 points in his W, it gets his slow up to a minimum of 40% once the AP scaling is added on. So he first max levels his E, and then he does W, and then finally Q. For summoner spells, Apo always takes flash and heal. As with any support that is shielding and heal based, heal is often better on the support rather than the AD carry. His AD carry swaps between exhaust, barrier, and cleanse depending on the enemy team, but he sticks to heal as it's very effective on Janna. For his build, he starts Frostfang, as it fits into his lane-dominant poke playstyle best, and he is able to earn maximum gold with this item. From there, he often takes an early base to pick up a Dark Seal, as well as Boots of Mobility to increase his early game roam power. He's also often liked cooldown reduction boots as well to increase his early game fighting power, so consider these as well, especially if you're playing with a lane-dominant AD carry. These might be better because you'll be fighting more bot lane early and won't need to be moving as much. First item he gets is Athene's Unholy Grail, getting Fiendish Codex as his first component if needed. With this item and a Dark Seal, he normally has even more AP than his mid laner at this point of the game, so you can see why the early game poke is so effective. After Athene's, he chooses his next items depending on the game. If he has multiple high damage, attack-based carries like Misfortune, Ashe, or a top lane Jax on his team, then he'll get an Ardent Sensor for them. If he is against enemies with high duration CC, like a Zoe, Ashe, or Pantheon, then he'll grab a Mikhail's Crucible second instead to counter this CC as early early as possible. Otherwise, if neither of these are true, or he just thinks he'll be able to end the game very quickly, then he prefers to get Redemption, as it's very cheap and it gives a lot of early teamfight power, and we know that Apo loves early teamfighting. A good final build in most games would be Frostfang, CDR Boots, Dark Seal, maybe even Magi's, Athene's, Redemption, and Ardent Sensor. Obviously, don't get an Ardent Sensor if you have no auto-attack based carries on your team. You could just buy some AP or a different support item. Here are the runes he's taken pretty much every game of his climb. Summon Airy to buff Janna's shielding, Mana Flow Band to help his poke, Absolute Focus again for the poke, and Gathering Storm to help him continue to carry through the late game. Gathering Storm ensures his AP values keep up with enemies' damage, making sure his shielding stays strong. For his secondaries, he takes Eyeball Collection and Relentless Hunter, which shows his focus on snowballing and roaming. If you're not going to play this aggressive Janna style, then these runes will be pointless. For stats, he takes 1 Adaptive, 1 Magic Resist, and 1 Armor. These are good in a general case, but you don't need the Magic Resist if enemies are both AD, so you would then swap it for 2 Adaptive. Subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and like if you learned something new. I have a lot of videos like this on my channel, so check those out as well. Thanks so much for watching.